Hello everyone, welcome to today's lecture. In our last lecture, we spent some time to look at sports facility during the ancient times. In today's lecture, we're going to look at the evolutions of the sports facilities in the United States in the past 200 years. When we look at the sports facilities, the ancient times, we mainly talk about three facilities. The first one was stadia. Stadia was located in ancient Greece, which was the facility for hosting the ancient Olympic Games. And the second facility we introduced was Hippodrome. The Hippodrome was also located in ancient Greece. It was utilized to host the traditional horse racings. And the third stadium we talked about last time was the Rome Colosseum. So Rome Colosseum is kind of like a multi-purpose stadiums. They were utilized to host different types of the competition, that including how a man kill animals and how they kill prisoners and some other competitions, right? So those are the sports facilities in ancient times. Today we're going to focus on how the sports facility has been constructed in the U.S. Before we're going to look at the histories of the sports facility in the U.S., so we would like to give you a broader view about the stadiums in the world. Based on the website stadiums, they say we have at least 12,000 stadiums existing in the world. Most of the stadiums, you find out 4,000 stadiums, more than 4,000 stadiums, about close to 4,500 stadiums are located in Europe, and about nearly 3,000 stadiums here in the US, in Canada and Mexico, and North America. Right, there are about 1,500 stadiums in South America. There are about 1,800 stadiums in Asia, and also about 400 stadiums in Africa, and also have about 700 stadiums in the Middle East. Right, so they also have about 730 stadiums in the Central America, and about 300 stadiums in Oceania, like Australia, New Zealand, right? So this is like how many stadiums exist in the world. We just possibly anticipate the numbers that, because we talk about the definitions about stadium is kind of different. How we define them is kind of different, right? When we look at the sports facility here in the US, they find out we have about 2,500, nearly 2,500 stadiums in the US. In terms of state, all the different states will have stadiums, right? So some state like California, here number shows have 167 stadiums. And also in Texas, they have about 416 stadiums, right? So a lot of states have more than 100 stadiums, like Florida and Georgia, they all have more than 100 stadiums, right? So those will give you some brief numbers about how many stadiums in the US. In Ohio, we have 148 stadiums in the Ohio's, right? So this just like give you a brief idea about how many stadiums here in the United States. When we look at the evolutions of the sports facility in the US, so we could find out that something kind of interesting is the evolution of the sports facilities actually reflect the change of the economic changes, reflect the changes in customers' demands, and also reflect the social changes. Also, due to the sport has been changes, and the sports facilities has also been changed as well. When we try to compare a lot of similarities, differences between the sports facility in ancient times or the current times, we see one thing is like during the ancient times, they have a lot of different classes of seatings. Like for instance, in Rome Colosseum, we talk about they have different classes of seatings. Today, we still have like different classes of seatings existing in today's stadiums, right? So you pay more money, you'll be able to see in the better position where you'll be able to watch the game better from a better angles, sitting in more comfortable chairs, right? Also, the second thing we think that's kind of very similar is the jobs remain very similar. So in the ancient times, we talk about they were hiring people to keep things running smoothly. Like for instance, during the Rome Colosseums, they hired soldiers to work to shelter spectators for the hot suns. Right? They also hire people to prevent animals from hurting these audience. Today, we also really emphasize the securities during the competitions. So we try to protect all our spectators and protect all the people who participate in the competitions. So those job functions were also very similar. When we look at the evolutions of the sports facility in the US, we can break it down into 8 different stages. You will find out stadium construction has been changed dramatically during these 8 stages. Okay, the stage 1, so that was at the beginnings of the 19th centuries, we say is from 18,000 to 1850s. So during that time, you think about what was the most popular sport during that time. So during that time, people started to create sports like baseball, start playing some sport, we call it football, right? So they played for fun. And a lot of those sports at that time didn't have like a concrete rule that has been introduced, formally introduced. So most of sports facility has been served as a isolated and spontaneous events. A lot of time it's like you went to colleges and when after the class, then you've got nothing else to do and you just talk to your classmates, say, hey, do you have minutes? We're gonna play some sport afterwards, and then you can start playing sport. And all those sports they were playing at that time didn't have like formal rules. So the rules being changed all the time. Today you're using these rules, tomorrow you might use a completely different rules. So a lot of sports facility at that time was obviously very temporary. And also interesting thing about the sports facility at that time was all the sports facility at that time didn't really have a concrete fields. So as long as you have the rooms, then you'll be able to play. So all the facility at that time, obviously they were temporary because they didn't have fixed territories and they have a very limited rules. Also, since all those activities was really casual activities, it was really difficult to distinguish spectators from participants because people playing there at that same during the same time, other people's also standing there watching the games. So you can't tell who's actually playing the game, who's actually watching the games, because that's not like a concrete field was introduced at that time. So and also since that's a very limited rule, so a lot of conflict occurs due to the absence of these official rules. So those are what the facility looks like in the stage 1. So that was about from 1800 to 1850s. So all those facilities were temporary. In stage 2 was from 1850 to 1884. Compared to the facility in stage 1 and the stage 2, the biggest difference is you look at the facility at that time, they have a shape, right? Straight line was introduced, transform the facility from an irregular shape to a fixed shape. So baseball was actually, again, baseball, football was still the most popular sport at that time in the US. And also with the development of the baseball and football, with more rule has been introduced, people started playing in the regular games, right? And one of the biggest differences between the facilities here is very easy for you to separate participants from spectators because the straight line was introduced to construct the facilities. So whoever play inside, they were a player playing the games, right? Who's sitting outside, those are spectators. So this became very clear at that time. We're using baseball as example. At that time, there were 2 types of baseball were really popular. The one type of baseball called Massachusetts versions of the baseball. We also call it town ball. The second type of the baseball was pretty popular at that time was New York's versions of the baseball. So those 2 versions of baseball were dominated in the US. And in some area, they're playing Massachusetts baseball. In some area, they were playing New York versions of baseball. Eventually, the baseball we're playing today was adopted from New York version of the baseball. So what made New York versions baseball became more popular than other versions of baseball was because obviously New York was an economic center at that time. So people had the opportunity to travel to New York to watch the game. Their economic impact was so huge, they'd be able to really impact how sports has been developed in other areas. So that's one of the reasons why New York version of the baseball became more popular. So the second reason is because New York version of the baseball has a foul line. So foul line, they can better regulate the competition area to see spectators off the playing field and limit the numbers of the player participate on it. So that's why New York versions of baseball became more popular. And today, the baseball we were watching was also adopted from New York versions of the baseball. With more and more rules, particularly standardized rules, has been introduced in both baseball and football at that time. So all the facilities, they were still temperate in nature. Why they were still temperate in nature? So that was because based on the construction material, all the facility was constructed by wood at that times. So it was really easy to catch fire. So that's why they were still like temperate in nature. On all the facilities, in order to maximize the revenue generation, because you spend money to build these facilities to generate more revenues. So they has been utilized for the multi-purpose competitions. So you have a baseball ballpark. You also use the baseball ballpark to organize other events in order to maximize the revenue generations. So one of the example at that time in stage 2 is Union Ground Ballpark. This is what a Union Ground Ballpark looks like in New York. So this is how the facility looks like in stage 2 in the United States. And during the stage 3, so that was between 1885 to 1902. Okay, what do you think about what has happened in 1885 and 1903? What has happened? And one big things happened during that time was sport. They became more commercialized. So sports facilities also have to accommodate these particular interests. Refresh your memory a little bit. So in 1885, during that time, we had the first professional sports teams. Okay, which team was the first professional sports in the U.S.? Obviously, it's the Cincinnati Reds, right? It was called Cincinnati Red Stockings. It was founded in 1869. The team was existing for like 3-4 years at the beginnings. So why they were the first professional sports team is because the players, they're able to play for money, right? They're not just play sport for fun, for the casual activities, right? They play actually for money. So they actually pay them salary to play the games. And also the first professional league was also created in 1876. And then in the 1880s-ish, so more and more professional teams were founded and more professional leagues were created. So that actually give the opportunities for the sports facility to be updated and become more like a place how we're able to become a place for the entertainments. And also because sports became more commercialized, for all the people, if you want to watch sport, you have to start paying money. So at that time, you need to go and buy tickets in order to watch baseball games. So the study shows in about 1885, if you want to watch MLB games at that time, it costs you about 50 cents. So 50 cents equal to $8 today. So you can go and watch that. So most of the facility at that time was also multi-purpose, and most of the facility were founded by the private business. For all the businessmen, when they construct the facilities, they're still trying to make it temperate because it's relatively cheap. Because they want to use that money, use that facility to generate more revenue. So they still use a temporary material to construct the entire facilities. So they're very cheap, cheaply built, and also all the facilities are kind of small at that times. So this is how the facility looks like in stage 3. So all the ballparks in stage 3, they were still made of wood. So a lot of time they didn't have these outfield fans. So because we talk about if you want to watch baseball at that time, you have to buy tickets, right? So they actually built borders at the end of property to prevent those people who didn't buy the ticket but want to watch the game. So they try to make sure everyone who are inside the stadiums, they have to buy a ticket to watch the games. So what is the good example for the stadiums facilities in stage 3? We say is Westside Park that's located in Chicago. So Westside Park, they actually have two different types of Westside Park. So it was a ballpark the Chicago Cubs was using before they moved to Wrigley Fields. So this ballpark means a lot to Chicago Cubs. The ballpark was opened on June 6, 1885. You look at the ballpark building at that time, look very, very similar to all the ballpark that we're seeing today, right? This ballpark at the beginning, they constructed in 1885. So Chicago Cubs, initially they were playing at the Lake Farm Park, but they moved to the West Side Park in 1885 after it was open. At the beginning, it could accommodate about 10,000 fans. And later, the ballpark was expanded in 1893. They opened a new West Side park that was just a few blocks away from the old ones. So the new West Side park was able to accommodate about 12,500 fans. Because Cubs playing really, really well at that time. So this ballpark played a very important role in Cubs history because this ballpark witnessed his 2 times of the World Series victories that back to 1907 and 1908. Some Cubs fan, you might remember the most recent World Series victory was back to 2016, right? So before that, that was 1907 and 08. So that was in Westside Park. So the Westside Park, Cubs also had the highest winning percentage seasons in 1906 in the MLB history. So this ballpark play a very important role at that time. So this is what the sports facility looks like in stage 3. So it's about 120 years ago, right? So the ballpark very similar to what we have today in terms of shape, right? In stage 4 was from 1903 to 1919. Right, compared to this facility in the first 3 stages, in stage 4, we finally have the first permanent sports facilities. So facilities in stage 4, they were built in which pay for admissions. So they were using a kind of very good material to build this entire facilities. Most of the facility, they were using steel framework, so it's very stable, unlike the traditional ballpark they built in the past. They were using wood, so it's not quite stable. Now they're using steel frameworks, really stable. They have a lights, so to make sure the game are able to play at night. They have a pretty decent infrastructures as well, and also with the sport become more commercialized, all those sport parks are also able to accommodate a lot of different kind of requests. Most of this ballpark was actually built in the city centers, so it's not quite big. And also to accommodate a lot of requests, they started to introduce some of the technology and luxuries. And in this ballpark, they also have a very big scoreboard, and people are able to see the score. And also they have a grandstands as well, right? So when we talk about the ballpark, so to build a ballpark at that time, it cost about $57,000. Sounds very cheap, but when it comes to today's money, it's about $1.43 million to build a ballpark at that time, right? So one of the really well-known example for the ballpark in the stage 4, one is Fenway Park, one is Wrigley Field. Fenway Park is the ballpark that we're still using today in Boston, right, for the Boston White Sox. And the Wrigley Field obviously is the Cubs' current stadium. They're located in Chicago. So you look at these ballparks and you can find out how they different compared to the ballpark in stage 3. It's a little bit different, right? Fancier, come with more requests, also more stables, right? So, and for the Wrigley Field's evolution, here is a quick link here. You can keep on the links and give you some idea how the Wrigley Field has been changed since it was constructed about 100 years ago. Okay, so this is about facilities in stage 4. In stage 5 and 6, that was right after 1919 until about 1950s. Think about what was the biggest difference at that time. So 1919, 1920, and until 1950. So one of the big difference is media start to deeply involve. You start to have the radios. We talk about media development at the beginning. It was newspaper, and then you have radio. So radio became a very important platform where sports fans, particularly baseball and football fans and basketball fans, obey the news about their teams. Right, so to accommodate those particular requests, you can see how the sports facilities started to incorporate those functions. So stage 5 and stage 6, so most of the stadiums, they were built permanently and also for the single purpose use. So most of these stadiums, they were using reinforced concrete materials and using structural steel, which is make it very stable. So can make sure this facility could be used for a very long period of time, not just for very temporary times. For all those facilities, in order to keep this construction cost low, so for all these sports enterprise, they chose cheap locations. So we talk about this facility in stage 4. A lot of them were constructed in the downtown area, right, in the cities, in the downtown. So, but like all the most of the facility in stage 5 and 6, they were built outside of the towns. But they also try to build in the area that they can help them to grow their fan base. So majority of the facility will be outside the town, but that very close to public transportations, like to make sure people are able to, take the public transportation and, go to the stadiums and then watch the games. So those are kind of like differences in terms of locations. They have a lot of renovations for the stadiums in stage 5. So they adding a lot of new seats. They have more fancy restaurant and concessions. Instead of like the scoreboards also changes. They were using electric scoreboards so they can change the score automatically instead of using people to change the scores. And they also have a more fancy light and make sure more games will be able to play at night. So those are what the facility looks like in stage 5 and stage 6. Stage 6, the facility looked very similar to stage 5. They basically just consider more about expansion. We talk about during that time, right, 20s to 1960s. So media will play a very important role. So at the very beginning was radio play a very, very important role. So radio started to live those football games and the baseball games from 1930s. So at the beginning, the radio just light it for free. So the baseball managers find out, fans didn't really buy a ticket and go and watch the game. They just decided to stay at home, listen to the radios, and they were really angry about it. They say, "Oh, all the radio, you can't live our games." Right. So because we want fans to go and buy a ticket and come here and watch the game, because you're live the games and not paying anything, so we lose a lot of money. So in order to live the game, radio signed a contract with these professional baseball teams. They say, okay, we could live the game, but we would like to pay you the broadcast right fees. So radio started to pay broadcast right fee, and then they're able to sit inside the stadium and live the game from inside. Since they're paying the fee, right? So the stadiums also need to increase that particular section for media. You can see the stadium in stage 6, you have a press box that accommodate the newspaper reporters, right? You also have a radio sections where you'll be able to accommodate these radios host, allowing them to live game from inside since they are paying money. So they get more media exposure and they can get more general public's interest about team's performance. They're more likely to come and watch the games, right? So the facility obviously a lot bigger than before, because in the past we talked about stage 4. Stadium was constructed inside the downtown area, so it's very, very, you don't have a lot of space that you can grow the stadium. But since stage 4, 5, and 6, stadium has been constructed outside of cities, so you have a lot of space that you can continue to grow. You can construct kind of slightly bigger stadiums. Also, when the sport become more commercialized, more advertising opportunities, so that they create a massive advertisement during the games, have the lights on, and so they look a lot fancier than before. So those are what the stadium looks like in stage 5 and 6. In stage 7, that was starting from 1960s to 1980s. In this stage, we called it cookie cutter facilities. So most of the stadium built during that time, they did a research to find out 18 stadiums they built in that time. They look more or less the same. One of the example is the Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh. Because why did they have to look very, very similar? That was because about their funding sources. So in the past, most of the facility were built before 1960s. They were using private funds, so private organization, businessmen, they invested, they build a facility by using their own money, so they have to think about all the different way to make the money for building that stadiums, right? But after 1960s, more and more governments would like to use public fund to subsidize stadiums constructions. We're going to talk a little bit more why later, but we'll look at the stage 7, what the stadiums, what the characteristic for the facility constructed in stage 7. The first big change is the locations. A lot of these facilities were built outside of city, instead of in the cities, built outside of cities. To build outside of city, because in 1960s, 1980s, a lot of house family, they don't have their own car, so they will have to build a massive parking facility there surrounding those facilities, right? So that was the one big difference. Second big difference compared to stadiums in stage 5 and 6. We talked about stage 5 and 6. Radio was mainstream media at that time, but stage 7, television became main things. So cable TV started in about 1970s. So 1950s, TV became mainstream medias. A lot of games were broadcast through television, so they have to accommodate their requests as well. You can see when you build the facilities, you have to accommodate these media broadcasting requests. They have a radio station, you have the TVs here, right? to try to make sure the game is being able to televise on the mainstream media platforms. So in 1960 and 1970, when we look at the demographic change in the US, we find out the American population, they started to shift from east, Midwest to the west and the southern states. And population in the suburban location has also been grown dramatically. So most of those areas, the stadium were built during the time has been mainly chosen those areas, right? So so we talk about most of the stadium were built actually outside the city and with the big parking structures. And also to enhance the fans watching experiences, they started to add a lot of luxury things. So those are what the stadium looks like in stage 7. We talk about in stage 7, sports facilities started to use more public funds. We're using a number. We'll show you a number. Among all the MLB stadiums you look at, before 1966, all the MLB stadiums, they were privately funded, right? But after 1966 until today, every stadiums, most of the stadiums, they were funded by both public fundings and private fundings. Public funding play a more important roles. And also you look at all the sport parks are being utilized by these MLB teams. Most of those teams, they have the new ballparks. The studies show 27 out of 30 MLB franchises that construct a brand new facilities after 1980s, right? So more public funding has been utilized in the facility constructions. So why the cities want to subsidize the sports facility by using public funds? Because the studies show having a professional sports team can really help grow with the local economics. And there's also research show having a professional sports team, then we need to have the great sports facilities. When we build this great sports facility, we can create more construction jobs. So having a professional sports team in town, they can really generate additional revenues in the communities and also expand the local employment, because you have professional sports team, have the team, then you can create a lot of job associated with this sports franchise. And having a sports team can also attract tourists and the company to the whole city. So more investment, you can bring in more investment from outside, and also more tourists will like to come here. So you can also generate more revenues from having those tourists, right? And then you can continue to increasing the spends and jobs, right? And also people believe having all those professional sports team, you could really have the multiplier effect to increase locals' income. So that's why a lot of local governments would like to use public funding to subsidize sports facilities and would like to give them a support. And also a lot of times professional sports team, when they become pretty popular, when they play a very important role in local communities, they started to threat those local governments that if we are not going to have a great stadiums here, we will have to relocate it to another communities, right, in order to keep those teams here. So the local government decided to subsidize those sports facilities. So that's why they look very, very similar, right? So because you don't have a lot of right to talk about what this stadium should looks like, because you're not using your own money, you're using public funding's monies, right? So that's why the facility was constructed during the stage 7, they look very similar. For the stage A, so that was from 1992 to today. So what the sports facility looks like today is obviously much bigger, maxi structures. In the past, from maxi structure to smaller structures. So most of the sports facility before 1992, we talk about they were constructed outside the city, maxi structure, parking lot. But now a lot of sports facility were constructed after 1992. They become smaller. They chose city area, with more public transportations, and also easier for people to commute to watch the games. A lot of these sports facilities, they look very fancy, right? Because they come up with a lot of innovative ideas in order to enhance fans' watching experiences, right? They have a great restaurant, great concessions, considering different types of sports fans. They have ADA seatings, right? They have very tight security check, right? They have a luxury seating. Now sports become a lot more commercialized than before, right? More business got involved, more sponsors, so they have a big spaces for advertising and sponsorship signage, and also people not just watch sport but also enjoy the atmosphere. So a lot of entertainments are included. So they have a lot of entertainment area that has been included. To accommodate the TV requests, so they do have a lot more camera. You can watch the game from a very different angle when you stay at home watching TV, and people are also stadiums are using retractable woods. Retractable woods is you'll be able to play in the sunny days when we have a storm, but we can close the roof and you can also play in the stadium, so we're not going to delay our schedules. And we're also using artificial turf to make the stadium looks great. Environmental friendly is also important. We also have using video bars, and a lot more technologies got involved. Providing Wi-Fi, you'll be able to watch the game, also share your watching experiences on your social media platform, and using this big video ball, and they can have a lot more interaction with you, right? If you go and watch the game, they say, hey, please post our photos, and we are able to show you photo on the big screen, really create that very close relationship with the fans to really help you enhance your watching experience. Of course, ticket price a lot higher than before because they really spend a lot of money to building up these fancy things, right? So this is how sports facility has been constructed in US, 8 different stages. So I have a quick discussions here. What are the driving force behind the evolution of sports facility in the US? We talk about 8 different stages. Basically, how the sports facility being develops and evaluated, that was based on 3 reasons. The first one is development of sports, right? Remember at the very beginning, when the sports didn't really have a concrete rules, the facility looked like that, right? Didn't really have the, we're using it in regular shape, right? With more rule has been introduced, with more requirement, and then we will have to accommodate that particular request. The sports facility has been changed, has been upgraded. So that's the first big change. Second one is improvement of technology can really enhance people's watching experience. They can really help the upgrades of the sports facilities, right? Technology, we can talk about how media technology has impact our watching experiences. At the beginning was radio, and later on we have TV, and now we are able to see inside the stadium, can watch the video replays, so which can also help us understand what's going on in the games better about the games. And also we enhance a lot of entertainment right now. We have a big screen, we have LED lights, they can really try to protect the environments. So those are technology can also enhance our watching experiences, or also made facility become a lot fancier than before. And also commercialize of sports also really changed the sports facilities. So compared to sports facilities about 100 years ago, sports facility now, we have a lot more business partner got involved with the business operations, sports business operations. We have to accommodate their requests, sponsors, partners, right? So the commercialization of sports also have huge impact on the evolutions of the sports facilities. Thinking about today, we are actually living in a great time. So we are also trying to build a new stadiums in the futures. So that's a new concept has been introduced called smart stadiums. Hopefully we'll be able to connect everything by using the smart stadiums. So what the smart stadium should looks like, so what the stadium should looks like in the future is stadium become a lot more smarter, that we don't need to do a lot of different things that they can really help us solve a lot of problems that we are facing. For instance, when we are driving to the stadiums, one of the difficulty for us is we don't know where we'll be able to find good parking spots, right? Having a smart stadiums in the future possibly is when we're driving to the stadiums. So, the little app can let you know where you'll be able to find the parking space, how far it's going to be from the stadiums, and how you'll be able to walk to the stadium right away, save you a lot of time and energies. So when you're watching the games, sometimes you got thirsty and you got hungry, you want to order things, you could just order something and someone would deliver the food to you right away. So that's like smart, then you don't have to stop there and then go and find a place to eat and drink, right? And if you want to buy some particular souvenirs, you could just also order online, someone can give it to you right away instead of just going to this official store and waiting in the long queues in order to buy those merchandise products. So hopefully the stadium in the future will also become more interactive, have a lot more interactive events. They can really build out the connections between spectators and also the participants, right? So those are what the smart stadium should looks like in the future. Hopefully technology can help us get there sooner. Okay, so that's about the evolutions of sports facility in the United States. If you have any question about these topics, don't hesitate and you can shoot me an email, let me know. All right, that's it for today. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you guys next time.